Hello and welcome to this week's Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adokru. Today, I'm very pleased to say we are joined by Lee Wingate. Lee is 1/3 of the Other Bundesliga podcast, a show dedicated to the Austrian Bundesliga and the Austrian national team. Lee is joining us today to discuss the Austrian Bundesliga. We'll look at Red Bull Salzburg, the other contenders in the league, the wealth of young talent coming through within the league and the Austrian national team. Before we start, we would like to bring to your attention our new Twitter giveaway competition where you could be in for a chance to win a Premier League jersey of your choosing. Simply retweet the post and follow us at Wyfutbol_. This is in aid of a name change to, as you can now see on your player, Wyfutbol and the new spelling. The competition is also in aid of our new website and blog where you'll find short form articles alongside our original podcast content. So Lee, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm good. How are you guys?
Yeah, can't really complain. It's a bit chilly outside, but apart from that, good.
Similar situation here.
Yeah. So how is Vienna? How has it been during coronavirus, or how is it now?
It's a lockdown right now, and that's supposed to come to an end on Sunday. Then moves towards a kind of lockdown light. But I imagine it's been pretty similar to most European countries and what you guys have experienced the last few months as well. Not ideal. Fortunately, we're able to get out a little bit here and there to go to some games. Kind of breaks up the time at home. But yeah, I think it's been the same for everyone really.
So fans are back in the grounds in some capacity, are they? So I think that's starting today in the UK.
At the moment, we have a small number of fans allowed at games, but it really detracts from the atmosphere. At the moment, during the full lockdown, which has been a couple of weeks, there haven't been any fans. So I was at the Vienna derby at the weekend and seeing a Rapid Austria-Vienna game with no one in the stadium, it's just really sad because it's one of the highlights of the football calendar here, and it just felt like a very sad occasion. But for some games, once the full lockdown ends, they will allow, I think, some fans back into the stadium. So that's a start. And the clubs need money, obviously. So it's important that they can get back.
But so to kick things off, Lee, I thought we'd just start by touching on the other Bundesliga, your page, your blog, and obviously your podcast. I'd be interested to know basically how that all kicked off for yourself and your colleagues.
So we've been friends for a long time. All lived in Vienna since around 2015, and we kind of obviously watch a lot of Premier League, and I do some work in the German Bundesliga. So we watched a lot of football together, but we found that there's this kind of league out there that we didn't know anything about, and it was right on our doorstep. So we decided to try and kind of force it a little bit. I kind of use the analogy of an arranged marriage. We tried to make ourselves love it. See if we could get into it and see what we thought of it. And it kind of just took off from there. We found ourselves getting really interested in the league, getting accreditation to go to the games. We did some really cool interviews. Probably the highlight being with Salzburg's coach, Jesse Marsch, who's just a really great guy. That was a great interview. And then just by coincidence, more and more English teams started coming out here and other teams as well. We've seen the likes of like Napoli, Genk. I'm going to the Atletico Madrid game against Salzburg next week, which is going to be kind of a decider for the group. And, it's just kind of snowballed really. And yeah, we've really enjoyed the journey.
Yeah. So have you got a favorite team back home in England?
Fully. Sorry for the disruption. My Amazon Alexa is going crazy in the background and I didn't have to shut her up. So I hope you can either edit that out or it's just a bit of color in the pod.
No worries. Lee, I thought you had enough.
No. It's she's chatting in the background, and I'm trying to work out what's the best way to go about this. But she wasn't stopping. Favorite team back home. I've always been a United fan, but I work for Borussia Dortmund now, so I think sort of my football fandom is migrating a little bit. I follow the German Bundesliga very closely as well as the Austrian one.
Yeah, so kind of to move things on a little bit, Lee. The Austrian league is heavily dominated by Red Bull Salzburg, and they currently sit top of the league with LSK, I believe, in second place. So kind of the first question I had for you is, can anyone stop Salzburg? Because I think at the moment they've won the league every single season since I think 2012, 2013.
Wow.
Can that, monopoly end, or is it going to be the same old this season, do you think?
It's hard to see it stopping. I mean, the closest thing we've had to a title race in years was last season, where Lask ran them really close. So the way the league works here is you have like 22 rounds, so the 12 teams play each other once, home
Yeah.
and away, pretty standard, and then it splits into a top six and a bottom six. And those top six places compete for the title in the European places, and then the bottom six are trying to avoid that one relegation spot. And in the first half of the season, Lask won all 11 of their away games, which has never been done in the Bundesliga before. And they ran them pretty close. In the end, there was a bit of a scandal where they were caught training during the coronavirus restrictions. So they were filmed training when they weren't supposed to be, and they were docked points, and they never really recovered from that. They lost a lot of games in the championship round, as we call it, the final stage of the season. And that was as close as it's come to somebody really challenging Red Bull Salzburg properly. Otherwise, unless there's an exceptional season like that again, I can't really see it happening, just because of the strength of their recruitment, their financial might. It's just hard to see. So at the moment, we're at the stage where Red Bull Salzburg have, I think, 14 league titles since their formation in 2005. And Rapid Vienna are the record champions on 32. And it honestly wouldn't surprise me if I was sitting here in 20 years saying Red Bull Salzburg have overtaken them. So honestly, it's hard to foresee.
I see. You mentioned they were caught training, so it's a little bit like Spygate with Marcelo Bielsa trying to get or is it Derby County is trying to view their training session. Do you know who caught them, or is that just remained a secret?
So it gets even more intriguing, I think, because two masked intruders broke into their training ground the night before they were caught and installed security cameras. So on the one hand, you've got them being caught and clearly filmed training 4 times, actually. It wasn't just a one-off, doing something they weren't supposed to do. And then on the other hand, you've got the club themselves accusing these intruders of industrial espionage. So it was about as exciting as the Austrian Bundesliga gets. And originally they made the punishment 6 points, which meant that Lask went from being 3 points ahead of Salzburg to 3 points behind them. And then it was reduced to 4 on appeal. But by that point, their season had already gone. Like they never really recovered from it. You need everything you can get against Salzburg, and to be hit like that, their results just fell off a cliff. I think they got like 3 wins, a draw, and 6 defeats, or it's something along those lines, that they just fell off a cliff. And it was such a shame to see, because they'd had such a good season in the Europa League as well. This is a team that hadn't been in Europe for ages, that had only come up from the regional leagues a few years prior, and they'd beaten PSV Eindhoven 4-1 at home. They'd beaten Sporting, finished top of this group, then played against Alkmaar, then played against Man United. So it's just a shame that the campaign ended in that way, given that it started full of so much promise.
It's a shame indeed, reminiscent of when Arsenal season collapsed when Eduardo unfortunately broke his leg. I had to mention that story because it still bothers me to this day. Moving on, I saw one of your tweets saying that the Austrian Bundesliga at the moment has the highest number of goals per game, which was quite an interesting statistic. So would you say it's the most exciting league around at the moment?
That statistic is probably skewed heavily by Red Bull Salzburg, who, for example, I mean, the dominance of their dominance in the league is, I'd say, kind of unparalleled in Europe, or maybe there are a few leagues that are so heavily dominated by one team. But to give an example, they put 8 past St. Pölten at the weekend. They've hit teams for 7, about 4 or 5 this season.
Oh, wow.
So it's partly down to Red Bull Salzburg, but it's also partly down to the fact that there's, I don't know, maybe it's a lack of defending or some really good attacking. I imagine it's probably a lack of defending. But it does make it a really interesting game to see. I've been going to games here for 2 seasons now, and I've never seen a goalless draw.
Wow.
I think, it rarely happens. You do get a lot of goals, and it does make it exciting. I'd encourage a lot of people, because so many football fans, their horizons are either limited to the Premier League, which is undoubtedly the best league in the world, and then you might look a bit further afield at sort of Spain, Germany, and Italy. But few people really kind of go beyond that. They might see teams occasionally in Europe, but give the Austrian Bundesliga a try. It's hard to find where you can watch it. Like in the US, for example, they've just started broadcasting some games. in the UK, it's still not readily available. If you get the chance to even just take a break once Corona's over and either watch a game in Vienna or in Salzburg, it's a really nice experience, and you see some good stuff as well. So I'd recommend it, but maybe I'm biased.
Yeah, it's a very different experience. I went to Cologne, see a Cologne player, and obviously in the Bundesliga. I think it was a couple of years ago, around the Christmas time. And it's such a different experience. I mean, the stadium, for example, in Cologne, is a bit far out the city. It's a different experience altogether. You could drink, you could eat and drink at the stands. I think there's been some talk about that recently in England with regards to fans coming back during coronavirus.
Yeah, so moving back to Salzburg, the Salzburg steam train, as I'd like to call it now. Who have been the shining lights for them this season, would you say?
I think there's two players that probably stand out above all others. First of all, Patson Daka.
Yeah,
I call him Postman Patson because he always delivers. He's Nick. Sorry, I'm the guy on our podcast that's known for doing all the bad puns. So yeah, he's a very talented player. He became the first Zambian to score in the Champions League last season. Very fast, very athletic, very powerful, very good finisher, and very intelligent as well. So he's kind of got the whole package, and he's really stepped into Erling Haaland's shoes because there were a lot of doubts, I think, that Salzburg would be able to maintain the speed of the steam train, as you put it, without him. And they've done really well. He scored and ended up scoring 24 goals, I think, in the league last season and was the second top scorer. So he's definitely one. The other one, and probably the biggest name right now, is Dominick Soberslay, who you may have heard of because he's been linked quite a lot with Arsenal, among other clubs. He's got an incredible right foot, incredible set-piece taker, crosser. He just fits really well into Salzburg's system. So Jesse Marsch likes to play a sort of 4-2-2-2 formation. So it's kind of like with two deep-lying central defensive midfielders, and those two further forward are slightly wider. And Soberslay plays in that role on the left. And he's just been in really good form. I think he's always had the talent. But up until about March, he was quite inconsistent generally. So he was the player that gave the ball away when they lost 4-3 at Anfield last season. So they came back from 3-1 or 3-0 down or whatever it was, got it to 3-3. Then Soberslay gave the ball away and Mo Salah scored the winner. And I think really he never really, that game included, never really impressed me all that much until around March when the league split into the championship round. And he just came into his own, something like 5 goals and 8 assists in 9 games or something like that. And he's just grown from there. He's helped Hungary reach the Euros. And he's just been, again, the shining light for Salzburg this season. So I'd say those two probably stand out. But, I could talk all day about the others. I won't. I'll spare you. But there are lots of other talents there as well.
Are you you touched on Patson Daka, and the way also Sekou Koita, and we touched on before the call Karim Adeyemi, and in his outstanding somehow he managed to do a backflip from one standing leg without a run up, which was incredible for Salzburg against Lokomotiv Moscow after scoring. But seemingly, I mean, obviously Salzburg are part of the Red Bull network, who have a great wealth and network of players and knowledge within that. Is there links there? Is there a particular link there between, say, I mean, they're all African players who now play for Salzburg. Has there been like a link fostered there between that particular region?
I think the scouting network is really heavily focused on countries in Africa, like markets that were previously untapped. So if you look at some of the countries they've gone into, Mali, I can't name all that many Malian footballers, and then suddenly you've got a fair few coming through. Guinea as well, where they got Naby Keita from. Zambia as well, because there's Enoch Mwepu in addition to Patson Daka, who's currently in the squad. So I think their focus has just been to try and get a really good system set up on the ground in these countries. And also it gives the young players a platform to shine in Europe. Young African players, they want to get to Europe like most young players all around the world. And they know that if they impress with Salzburg, then they might get a bigger transfer elsewhere. So it works both ways. It's good for the player and the club.
Yeah, so speaking about transfers, do we think Soberslay, or if I've said his name correctly, do you believe he'll be in Europe very soon, or Western Europe very soon? So you mentioned the links with Arsenal, and I've seen Bayern Munich, and also Leipzig, obviously, under the Red Bull network. Do we think it's going to happen in January, or is it like a summer thing, or do you think he needs even more time than that?
I think Salzburg, there's a realization here that when they've got these talented young players, they know that they're not going to keep them as much as they'd like to. So Jesse Marsch, I recently heard him on an interview saying, you can't resist the fact or hate the fact that these players are going to leave, because otherwise it will just get in the way of your cooperation and your working relationship with them. There's an acceptance that it's just the natural order and the way of things. A year ago, I was asked around this time whether Erling Haaland would leave midway through the season. And I said, no, he's going to stay until the summer. He hasn't even had a full season in Austria yet. And I was proven wrong. Within a few weeks, he was off to Dortmund. So, wary of making the same mistake. There's a chance that Soberslay could stay until the end of the season. But if Salzburg finish bottom of their Champions League group and there's no European football, I can't see him staying beyond the winter. So I think he could go in January. As to where he could go, there's so many players, I think around 20 now, that have gone from Salzburg to Leipzig. It wouldn't be surprising. But I think perhaps he's destined for the Premier League or I would say probably the Premier League would suit him well as well. So if I had to guess, I would say probably will go to England.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because obviously Liverpool have Minamino, who's come over here. And I remember when I watched the game last season, the front three was obviously Haaland, Hwang Hee-chan, and Minamino. And the latter two have struggled slightly, maybe to hit the heights of Haaland, who's obviously coming flying. And the other two, I think Hwang Hee-chan is struggling from coronavirus at the moment, and Minamino hasn't played poorly specifically, but also hasn't necessarily shone specifically that well. Do you think both of those two players will take time to adapt? Or do you think that maybe the moves to Europe were too soon for those types of players? Because I think when you come from Austria, someone like Haaland really surprised me, because he's come in and within seconds he's settled. And is it for those two players that the gap is potentially too large, or they just need more time?
I think it's a few things. I mean, I initially thought that Minamino to Liverpool, it was kind of that classic thing where, like back in the day, you see a player in the World Cup and buy him based on a few good performances. And it was a case of they saw him in the Champions League and they thought his release clause is something like 7 or 8 million. Why not have him? So he's there as a squad player in Minamino's case. I think that it was probably a very big jump for him. He needs regular playing time. He needs to be played in his right position, and he needs the trust of the coach. He's one of those players, I think he needs to feel the trust of the coach. So maybe that will come in time. But, Liverpool is there's such a wealth of talent there. I don't know if, I can't necessarily say that I'm sure it's going to work out for him. I really hope it does, but it wouldn't also surprise me if, you saw him moving to perhaps a slightly smaller club in the years to come if he's not getting the playing time he wants. Having said that, he is a real team player, so maybe it doesn't bother him that he's not getting first team football all the time. As for Hwang, I was really surprised about that transfer, because obviously Timo Werner left Leipzig and there's a big hole to fill at centre forward. So I thought that if they were going to take anyone from Salzburg, it would have been Patson Daka. So I was quite surprised to see Hwang Hee-chan, who is a very adaptable and versatile player, but it's primarily played out in a wide position. So I was kind of surprised to see that transfer happen. And I have to be honest, I haven't followed his progress that closely since he's got to Leipzig. But he's definitely, he's a very, very good player. And, if both of those guys are given the opportunity, they will do well.
And kind of my next question is, when we did our first podcast on the Red Bull network, we uncovered this small feeder club which is used in Austria called FC Liefering, which completely threw me when I was doing my research. And I'm aware that two of the both goal scorers, I believe, yesterday have spent some time there. And I wanted to ask how crucial the partnership between Liefering and Salzburg has been in developing talent for the first team in Salzburg, who have then gone on to do fantastic things.
It's incredibly important. So it's like their feeder club, and all of these young players, particularly the ones that come over from Africa, they ease them in at Liefering first. And then sometimes they have like cooperation agreements where players can sometimes play for Liefering, but also play for Salzburg. So it's an incredibly important structure. And a lot of the players that came through at Liefering were then part of the under-19 Salzburg team that won the UEFA Youth League a few years ago, 2017. not sure exactly. I think that was Jesse Marsch's predecessor, Marco Rosa. He got the Salzburg head coach job because I think the year before he'd won the UEFA Youth League, which is like the under 19 Champions League. So Liefering's incredibly important, and a lot of those players, they don't just put them in at Liefering, but it's quite commonplace here to have Salzburg loaning a lot of their strikers or their young midfielders out to other clubs in the Austrian Bundesliga for experience. So Liefering is one part of the puzzle, but they'll also, for example, Mergin Berisha, who scored twice yesterday against Lokomotiv Moscow. He was at Autak, which is a provincial club in the Bundesliga, right over in almost the western part of the country on the border with Switzerland. And it's it's a very small place, it's not a big name in European football by any means, but he got the experience there. Sekou Koita was down in Wolfsburg, who are playing regularly in the Europa League. And it's what Salzburg do. They bring players over and they kind of have this massive pool of talent. They bring them through at Liefering, send them out to other clubs in the Bundesliga, and then bring them back. And that's just how they work, and it works very well for them.
Oh, very interesting. And kind of one of the final questions I kind of have for you in this part anyway is, what are your thoughts on Jesse Marsch? So I know he was at New York Red Bulls at one point in time and then came over. And the reason why I asked that is because, especially in England, there's this stigma around US coaches, which is pretty outdated, I think. But, it's quite uncommon to see someone at the European stage or at a relatively good club like Salzburg managing who's from America. And I find it quite his story pretty interesting. I wanted to know what the view was of him in Austria.
Well, actually, when he was first announced as the replacement for Marco Rosa, it wasn't a popular choice. But I think he's really warmed himself to the fans very quickly, not just because of the success, but also the style of football, which is very attack-based. They'll always concede, but they'll always score a bucket load of goals as well. And also, I think just a personal touch. I think there's so many players from English-speaking countries or coaches as well who go abroad and they don't necessarily learn the language. Jesse Marsch from day one has been speaking German. I speak German. Jesse's German is great. It's quite broken in places, but he's trying, and it's like a respect thing. He's doing everything in German as much as he can. I think he's just he's been really warmly received now, and already there are, links about him, stories about him potentially going to Borussia Dortmund, for whom I think he'd actually be an excellent fit, and several other clubs as well. Obviously, a lot's also been made of the fact that he's, the first American to manage in the Champions League. He has a chance to become the first American to manage in the Champions League knockout stages if Salzburg can beat Atleti next week. So, it's just been a success story for him. And again, a benefit of this Red Bull network is that he was the assistant coach at RB Leipzig, and then he's handed the big job in Salzburg. Who knows? Maybe he'll end up being Julian Nagelsmann's replacement at Leipzig in a few years. It wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, Jesse's a really nice guy as well. Not just a good coach, but when we went there, we did our interview, and we went in and met him, and he said. So was it? He said something like, "Can I get you guys a drink? We've got plenty of Red Bull," which wasn't a surprise. But yeah, he's such a nice guy as well that I think he's just universally popular.
Yeah, the secret to the success is just unlimited cans of Red Bull throughout the system.
The Jamie Vardy recipe. Yeah,
we discussed that in a previous pod.
Yeah, we did.
But yeah, it's worked. It's worked, hasn't it? So it's a secret for success. So moving on now, Lee, to the Austrian national team, which, like the Austrian Bundesliga, has risen to prominence somewhat. So, I mean, I was doing a bit of research of my own prior to this and looking at where the national team were previously. And since the turn of millennium, Austria have only played at two major tournaments, one of which they hosted in 2008, the Euros. And in that same year of the Euros, they slumped to their lowest ranking of 105. That's in 2008. But they did reach as high as 10th in 2016. So quite the turnaround, and are currently ranked 23rd. So my first question to you is, what do you think has changed for the Austrian national team?
That's a tough one.
That's a big one.
I think there's there's a very good generation of players there. You pointed out that they were up to 10th in 2016. I think that point in time coincided with their qualification campaign for the Euros, where I think only England had a better record in that campaign. I think Austria won 9 of their 10 games. And so we went into that tournament really optimistic about Austria's chances. Then they ended up coming bottom of a group where you only needed to finish in the top 3 to qualify. That was a group with Portugal, Iceland, and Hungary. And, they really disappointed in that sense. Since then, they've got a new coach, Franco Foda, a German manager. And I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. Looking at it from a results point of view, Austria are in a relatively good position right now. They've just won a Nations League group with Romania, Norway, so where some of the players were reunited with Erling Haaland, and Northern Ireland as well. So from a results point of view, they're at the upcoming Euros. Great. They've won the Nations League group and they're now in League A. Fantastic. But I think also the style of football is something that causes a lot of people to be quite negative at the moment. They're very defensive, just about getting results. And these are players, a lot of them are schooled in the Red Bull philosophy, where it's all about attacking, going forward, pressing. And then they're linking up with the national team and almost playing a completely opposite style of football. And it just seems a bit counterintuitive to me when you've got all of these attacking players, not necessarily a centre forward, but lots of good creative players. I think there's a bit of caution about the upcoming Euros, because we know on the one hand they've got a lot of good players and they've been getting good results, but they've also got this track record where they struggle a little bit at tournaments, like in 2016, and also the style of football doesn't really breed too much optimism as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I was looking at the side, the last side that played Northern Ireland in the Nations League, as you mentioned, and pretty much almost the entire team plays in the Bundesliga. There's obviously you've got Konrad Laimer and Marcel Sabitzer that play for Leipzig, and there's a culture in the Bundesliga, has been for a number of years, of high pressing attacking mentality, and no more so is that evidenced at Leipzig, as you said. And so obviously for them to come in, and obviously as you said, to play a more defensive style or brand of football is obviously counterintuitive for a lot of them. But aside from maybe the players that I've just mentioned there, so Sabitzer, Laimer, we've also got Alaba, and Arnautovic, I believe, is still involved in the setup. Who would you say is the standout performers in the Austrian team that perhaps we don't quite know?
Well, you've got the 2 fullbacks who are very good. You've got, I think, Stefan Leiner. He's very good. And then, sorry, I'm looking over my shoulder here because I got the team sheet up. Ulmer of Salzburg. Ulmer of Salzburg is very good as well. So the 2 fullbacks. The player that I think really everyone will be talking about in a few years, I mean, at least everyone that's involved in German and Austrian football at least, is Christophe Baumgartner of Hoffenheim, who is an attacking midfielder who only made his debut this year, but he's already really like part of the furniture in the Austria team. He's a very good attacking, creative midfielder. Lots of good flicks, passes, and very dynamic. So he's one to watch out for. I think the issue is with Austria that they're actually more good players, but they don't really get in the team because Franco Foda, I think, is very conservative and very reluctant to field players in the Austrian Bundesliga. He usually picks players that are based abroad or based in Germany. And I think that's been a criticism of him because as LASK have risen, they've got some fantastic players. Their goalkeeper, Alexander Schlager, very good. Their defender, Gernot Trauner, who's unfortunately suspended for the Tottenham game this week. That's a real blow. But these are guys that deserve their place. And slowly it seems to be changing. They are getting chances, but I think that they need to be, regular fixtures in the team, really.
And kind of a question I have talking about the Austrian national team is, where can David Alaba not play? Because I think he's one of those players that over the years I've seen him feature in quite a few positions, and yeah, it's just for him as a player. I know that he's been linked. I have a question about that, about his future later on, but I just find him an incredible player, and I think with the younger players that you've mentioned, and I know they're playing conservative football, surely with him at the helm, with some of the people that Dryden mentioned, they still have a slim chance of maybe having a successful Euros. No.
I don't know. I'm forever the optimist. I'd like to think so, but I'm wary of the style that they play, and I don't know. I can't somehow. I want to believe they can have a good Euros, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, well, they've got their group is, I think, North Macedonia, the Netherlands, and Ukraine. So it's not the hardest of groups. You'd say from the outside. I mean, Netherlands have got a great young squad that have came through in recent years. I can't say I'm overly versed in North Macedonia and Ukraine, but it's a chance at least. They've done well in the Nations League, and what we'd say was a weaker group than what they're going to go into in the Euros. But there's a chance at least. And with the Euros, as we saw, and I'm not a big fan of it, that we saw last time, you can finish third and you can go through, and you can get through to the semi-finals, finishing third, like I think Wales did. And so there's forever hope within that competition, and hopefully it'll fare for England, but obviously hopefully it'll fare for Austria too.
Yeah, I think Portugal got to the final without. I mean, they didn't win a group game. I think they got 3 draws and got through the group in third place. So I think it has heavily diluted the competition. For teams like Austria, they are perhaps benefiting from that because they're not necessarily a team that you think would come in the top 2 of a group. So the option of qualifying through the third place is sort of, I suppose, a positive for them. But yeah, I mean, I still, as a football fan, just from a purist point of view, I don't like the fact that some of the third teams go through, because also it's like the Champions League used to be, where you have to be one of the best third place teams, and I think you need to know just within your group, are you going to finish in the top 2, or are you not going to finish in the top 2? And it should just be that clear cut, rather than it depending on what happens in other groups. And just to come back to your question before about David Alaba, which I didn't answer because I was focusing on the second part of the question. But David Alaba, he's so versatile, but he just excels in every one of these positions. So he used to be primarily a left back for Bayern Munich. Then the last half of last season, he was just a centre back all the time. And then for Austria recently, he's been playing on the left of midfield, and he also plays in central midfield. So yeah, I think he's just so versatile. He seems to slot in anywhere, and he's still Austria's best player. He's like, the David Beckham of Austria, basically. He's a very important player for them, and they'll need him if they're going to do well next summer.
Yes, so kind of moving on to his future, because I have quite a few friends who are Liverpool fans, and they've been screaming to me that, what's going to happen in January is David Alaba is going to sign from Bayern Munich, and then Liverpool are going to win the league, which I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure that's going to happen. But on his future in general, there seems to be quite a lot of, I wouldn't say negative comments from both him and Bayern Munich, but it seems to be that they're going to definitely part ways. So where do you kind of see him ending up? Do you see him secretly signing a new deal at Bayern, or is it going to be to the Premier League, or I think there were talks of Spain potentially?
There seems to be quite a lot of animosity between the Alaba camp and people at Bayern. So I think, for example, Uli Hoeneß, who I think up until recently was the president, I don't think he is anymore. He described Alaba's agent as a money-grabbing piranha, which is never really, a very good starting point for contract negotiations. So I would imagine that, I think he probably wants a new challenge as well. I'd imagine that, he might well move on to Liverpool when they've already got Andy Robertson at left back. Maybe as a centre back, he could go to Liverpool and play in that function. But I've seen him linked. You've seen him linked with a lot of countries, a lot of clubs in different countries. Chelsea, I've seen him linked with Chelsea as well. But I think personally, like he personally wants to go to Spain. I think that would be his preferred destination. He's reportedly not been that interested in a move to England. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of it and where he ends up. Then again, he could just do a complete U-turn and end up staying at Bayern and winning many more league titles and Champions Leagues. So remains to be seen.
All right, then, well, Lee, thank you very much for coming on today. Thank you very much for your insight. It's as I said, it's the Austrian Bundesliga, the national team, have become piqued the interest of many people in football, not just because of the forays in Europe of the likes of Salzburg, but also because we've got Euros coming up and we've got a wealth of Austrian talent next season. So the next year, sorry. So hopefully they will fare well in the Euros. But best of luck with the Other Bundesliga. We're fans, and hope it grows and continues to grow like it has been. So okay, thank you very much for coming on, and cheers.
Thanks to you guys. Pleasure to speak to you, and good luck with your podding adventures.
Cheers. Thank you. Cheers.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks a lot, Liam.